Michael Cole was one of the youngest billionaires in the city. He owned Cole Motors, a luxury car company that catered to the rich and powerful. Everyone knew his name, everyone wanted his friendship. But Michael wanted something more. He wanted truth. Tired of fake smiles, greedy investors, and women who only saw his wealth, he made a bold decision: to live as an ordinary man. No one would know who he really was. He would disguise himself as a poor mechanic and work in one of his own repair garages, a small branch tucked away in the noisy streets of Lagos. That morning he traded his designer suit for a faded blue jumpsuit, worn boots, and a rough brown cap. He smeared a little oil on his cheeks, looked into the mirror, and smiled for the first time in weeks. "Let's see who still sees me," he whispered. At the garage, the workers barely looked up when he entered. They were too busy fixing cars and wiping sweat from their faces. "You new here?" one of them asked, tightening a wrench. Michael nodded. "Yeah, just looking for work. I can fix engines." The man shrugged. "You get paid per job. Tools are over there. If you're lazy, you won't last a day." Michael smiled. "I'm not here to rest." He got to work immediately, blending in perfectly. His movements were confident, precise, though he made sure not to stand out too much. Sweat rolled down his dark skin as he bent over an old Toyota engine, his hands moving with skill that surprised even the foreman. By lunchtime, the other mechanics began whispering. "That new guy works like he's been fixing cars all his life," one said. "But something about him, his accent, his calmness, he doesn't talk like us." Michael heard them but said nothing. He just smiled quietly, enjoying the rare feeling of being unknown. When the sun began to set, he sat on a wooden bench outside the garage, drinking water from a plastic cup. The streets buzzed with life, buses honking, people shouting, the scent of roasted corn in the air. For the first time in years, he felt human again, free from the weight of money and expectation. He looked up at the sky and whispered, "Maybe here I'll finally find someone real." He didn't know that his test, his search for truth, was about to begin sooner than he imagined. Because the next morning, a familiar car would pull into that very garage, and behind the wheel would be the last person he ever expected to see, his fiancée. And in that moment, the billionaire pretending to be poor would come face to face with the truth he'd been searching for. The next morning at the garage began like any other, the clatter of metal tools, the rumble of engines, and the distant sound of Lagos traffic filling the air. Michael, still dressed in his faded jumpsuit, wiped sweat from his forehead as he tightened the bolts on a customer's car. His hands were rough with grease, his once polished nails now dark with oil. He had barely finished when a sleek, white Mercedes-Benz slowly pulled into the compound, its tires crunching against the gravel. The workers whistled low. "Whoever owns that must be loaded," one muttered, straightening his shirt. Michael didn't look up at first, until he heard a voice. "Excuse me, is the manager around? My car's been making a strange noise." His head snapped up instantly. His breath caught in his throat. It was her. Standing there, radiant under the morning sun, was Vanessa Brown, his fiancée. The woman he had fallen in love with months ago, the one who had sworn she'd stand by him no matter what. She hadn't recognized him, of course. How could she? Her dark brown skin shimmered in the sunlight, her hair neatly tied into a low bun, her soft lavender dress flowing with elegance. She looked every bit the picture of grace, but to Michael, her presence felt like a thunderclap. He froze. His heartbeat quickened. The wrench slipped from his hand and clattered to the ground. Vanessa frowned. "You there?" she said, pointing at him. "Can you fix this? I've been to 3 garages already, and they keep wasting my time." Michael swallowed hard. His mind raced. He hadn't planned for this, to face her while pretending to be someone else. But something inside him told him to stay calm. This was the moment he needed. "Yes, ma'am," he replied, lowering his voice to sound rougher. "Let me take a look." She crossed her arms, her tone sharp but not unkind. "Please hurry. I have a meeting soon." Michael walked around the car, pretending to inspect it, though his thoughts were far away. "She doesn't recognize me," he thought. "She doesn't even look at me twice." As he bent to check the tires, a single flower, the small red rose she always kept in the dashboard, fell out and landed beside his foot. He stared at it for a moment, remembering how she'd once told him, "A rose means loyalty, Michael. I'll always be loyal to you." The irony cut deep. "Is there a problem?" she asked impatiently. He blinked quickly, standing straight. "No, ma'am. Just fixing what's broken." She nodded and stepped aside, busying herself with her phone. Michael lifted the hood and got to work, though his eyes burned with emotion. Every time he looked at her reflection on the windshield, Memories of their laughter, their late-night talks, their promises, all flooded back. At one point, one of the workers whispered, "You're lucky, eh? Fine woman like that talking to you." Michael forced a smile. "Yeah," he said softly, tightening a bolt. "I guess I am." When he finished, he wiped his hands on a rag and closed the hood. "It's ready, ma'am. You can test it now." Vanessa stepped in, turned the key, and smiled slightly when the engine purred perfectly. "Finally. You seem to know what you're doing," she said. "What's your name?" He hesitated, then replied, "Cole." "Cole." She nodded absently. "Thank you, Cole." As she drove away, the scent of her perfume lingered in the air, a reminder of a love he once thought was real. And as the Mercedes disappeared into the busy road, Michael stood there silently, his heart heavier than before. He looked down at his oil-stained hands and whispered to himself, maybe this disguise wasn't just a test for others, maybe it's a test for me too. He didn't know that this encounter, this one ordinary morning, was only the beginning of a storm that would change both their lives forever. The sun had barely risen over the skyline when Michael arrived at the garage the next day. The streets of Lagos were just waking, hawkers shouting, buses honking, and the smell of oil and dust mixing in the humid morning air. Yet Michael's mind wasn't on work. It was on her. He couldn't forget Vanessa's face, her voice, or the way she'd spoken to him like he was invisible. That night he'd barely slept, replaying every moment. Was her love ever real? He wondered. Or was she only ever in love with my wealth? The sound of an approaching car broke his thoughts. He turned. His chest tightened. The same white Mercedes glided into the compound again. The workers rushed forward eagerly, already gossiping. "She's back, oh," one whispered. "Maybe she came for you, Cole," another teased, laughing. Michael forced a grin, but his heart thudded painfully. He wasn't ready. Vanessa stepped out, wearing sunglasses and a soft blue gown. She looked stunning, confident, composed, untouchable. Her dark skin glowed beneath the morning light, her braided hair falling perfectly against her shoulders. She wasn't the kind of woman anyone expected to return to a dirty garage, yet here she was. "Good morning," she said briskly. The noise came back. "I can't drive like this." Michael nodded slowly, keeping his eyes on the car instead of her. "I'll take care of it, ma'am." But this time as he opened the hood, he noticed something odd, a small folded letter wedged beside the engine. He froze. It had his company's logo on it, Cole Motors. "What's this?" he muttered under his breath, discreetly taking it out and slipping it into his pocket. He worked silently for the next few minutes, his mind racing. Why did she have a letter from his office? Was she in contact with someone there? Or was she hiding something? When he finally looked up, Vanessa was watching him closely. "You're quieter than yesterday," she said, a faint smile tugging her lips. Michael shrugged. "I just focus better when I'm working." "Well," she said, folding her arms, "that's rare these days. Most people just talk too much." Her tone softened slightly, curious, almost kind. Michael saw a glimpse of the woman he'd once loved, buried beneath her pride. But before he could reply, her phone rang. She answered quickly. "Yes, sir, I'm at the garage now," she said into the phone, her voice changing, more formal. "Yes, Mr. Cole will be there later for the board meeting. I'll email the proposal draft before he arrives." Michael's chest tightened. Mr. Cole. That was him. His fingers froze on the wrench. His fiancée, the woman who told him she loved him for who he was secretly working with his board behind his back. "Wait," she said into the phone, her eyes flicking toward him. "No, I don't think he'll find out. He rarely checks those reports himself." Michael's stomach turned cold. She was using him. The realization hit like a punch. All this time she'd been part of the plan, a corporate trick to get closer to his company, his wealth, maybe even his patents. The girl he'd once thought was his heart was one of the people trying to take everything he'd built. He tightened the last bolt, his jaw clenched. "Your car's fine now, ma'am," he said flatly. Vanessa hung up and smiled faintly, unaware of the storm in his eyes. "You're really good at this," she said, stepping closer. "If I owned a company, I'd hire you myself." Michael wiped his hands on his rag, staring at her. "Careful what you wish for," he said softly. "You might get more than you expect." She laughed lightly, not understanding. "You're funny. Anyway, thank you, Cole." She reached into her bag, pulled out a 500 Nigerian Nairas note, and held it toward him. "Here for your trouble." Michael stared at the money. For a moment the world stood still. His fiancée, the woman he once planned to marry, was now tipping him like a stranger. He swallowed hard and stepped back. "Keep it," he said quietly. You might need it more than I do. Confused, she blinked. Excuse me? But he didn't answer. He just walked past her, disappearing into the workshop, his steps heavy, his mind burning. That night, long after the garage closed, Michael sat alone in the back office. He took out the folded letter he'd found in her engine and opened it carefully. The contents made his heart drop. It was a confidential memo from his board, about replacing him as CEO due to a breach of trust and inconsistent behavior. The final signature space was empty, but the initials beside the draft belonged to Vanessa Brown. Michael leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. So that was it. The woman he loved wasn't just lying to him, she was part of the plot to take him down. But what Vanessa didn't know was that the man she'd mocked, the mechanic she'd tipped with pity, was about to rewrite the story in a way she would never forget. And as he folded the letter back and slipped it into his pocket, a cold determination settled in his eyes. Tomorrow, he thought, the game changes. The next morning dawned bright and humid, the kind of Lagos day when the air itself carried tension. The workshop buzzed with life, clanking tools, engines roaring, radios playing high-life tunes in the background. But amidst it all, Michael Cole stood apart, calm yet dangerous, like a storm before the rain. He had spent the night preparing, not just emotionally but strategically. He was done hiding. Today the mask would come off. A black convoy pulled up outside the garage gate around 10 a.m. Instantly, the noise inside died down. Mechanics froze mid-sentence. Even the air felt different. 3 SUVs, windows tinted, parked in a perfect line. Then came the sound of a car door, firm, deliberate. Out stepped Mr. Benjamin, the company's senior manager, followed by Vanessa, looking radiant in a red office gown and heels that clicked like thunder against the concrete floor. Her makeup was flawless, her poise confident. She had come for the board meeting Michael had heard her mention. Except this meeting was about to take a turn she could never imagine. Benjamin adjusted his glasses. Good morning, everyone, he announced. We're here for a short inspection before heading to the headquarters. Please cooperate. The workers murmured quietly, confused. Michael, still in his mechanic uniform, kept working on a car engine, pretending not to notice them. Then Vanessa's voice cut through the silence. Wait, that's him. She pointed. The mechanic I told you about, the one who fixed my car yesterday. Benjamin glanced over. Oh, this one? Yes, she said, smirking faintly. He's quite talented. Maybe we could use more people like him, simple, obedient, efficient. Her words dripped with casual arrogance. The other workers exchanged uneasy looks. Michael slowly wiped his hands on a rag, his jaw tightening. Then he stood, his tall frame towering over them. His face was calm, but his eyes, sharp and unreadable, made even Benjamin pause. He spoke quietly. Is that what you think of me, Miss Brown? Vanessa blinked, taken aback. Excuse me? Before she could say more, a new voice echoed from the gate. Attention everyone. Mr. Michael Cole, the CEO of Cole Motors, has arrived. All heads turned toward the gate. The workers straightened, whispering to one another in awe. Vanessa adjusted her hair nervously, looking toward the entrance. But her confusion deepened when she realized no new car had entered. Instead, the man standing before her, the same one in the grease-stained uniform, began removing his gloves slowly. I don't think he needs to arrive, Michael said softly. He's already here. A heavy silence fell. Benjamin frowned. What do you mean? Michael reached into his pocket, pulled out a gold-embossed ID card, and placed it on the nearest table. The name gleamed under the sunlight. Michael Cole, founder and CEO Cole Motors. Gasps filled the air. Vanessa froze completely. Her face drained of color. No, that can't be. But it was. Michael stepped forward, his eyes locked on hers. I told you to be careful what you wish for, he said quietly. You wanted to hire me, remember? Well, congratulations, Vanessa. I'm the man who signs your paycheck. She stumbled back a step. You tricked me? He shook his head. No, I tested you. I wanted to see if your love was real, if your loyalty was genuine. But instead, I found out you were part of a plan to replace me. Benjamin shifted uncomfortably. Sir, I had no idea. Oh, spare me, Michael interrupted. You both signed the memo. He tossed the folded document, the same one from her car engine, onto the floor. Next time you plan betrayal, maybe don't leave the evidence under the hood. The garage fell completely silent. Only the faint hum of an idle engine filled the background. Vanessa's voice trembled. Michael, please. I didn't mean. He raised a hand, stopping her. His expression softened slightly, but his tone was firm. I loved you, Vanessa. Not for your beauty, not for your charm, but for who I thought you were. Turns out, I was in love with an illusion. Her lips quivered. Michael, I was scared. The board said you were losing focus, that they'd cut my contract if I didn't cooperate. I never wanted to hurt you. Michael looked at her, pain flickering in his eyes. But you did. Not because they told you to, but because it was easy. He turned to Benjamin. Mr. Benjamin, effective immediately, I'm restructuring this branch. Anyone who values greed over loyalty can pack their bags by sunset. Yes, sir, Benjamin stammered, sweat glistening on his forehead. Michael turned back to Vanessa, his voice quieter now. As for you, Vanessa, I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Please, Michael. He shook his head gently. Goodbye, Vanessa. Then, without another word, he walked out of the garage. The workers stepped aside, bowing slightly, whispering in awe as he passed. For them, this wasn't just a revelation. It was a moment they'd never forget. Outside, the sun blazed against the polished hood of a luxury car waiting for him. Michael removed his cap and took a deep breath, the scent of oil and dust fading behind him. He wasn't just leaving a garage that day. He was leaving behind every illusion he'd ever built about love, trust, and loyalty. And as he stepped into his car, a new chapter began, not of revenge but of wisdom earned the hard way. A week later, the news of what happened in the garage spread like wildfire across the city. Every business blog, newspaper, and social media page carried the headline. Billionaire CEO exposes his fiancée and employees after disguising as mechanic. But Michael didn't care for the noise. He sat quietly in his office, this time in his true form, behind the massive glass desk that overlooked the city skyline. The man who once sought love through disguise had finally found something more valuable: truth. The door opened gently. His assistant entered with a nervous smile. Sir, the press is outside. They want to hear your statement. Michael nodded slowly. Let them in. Moments later, the large conference hall filled with reporters, cameras flashing, microphones raised. The billionaire stood tall, dark-skinned, confident, dressed in a simple white shirt and black trousers. No flashy suit, no gold accessories, just a man who had seen life from both sides. Mr. Cole, one journalist began, why did you pretend to be a poor mechanic? He smiled faintly. Because sometimes, he said, you can't see people's hearts from the top. You have to walk among them to understand who's real. Another journalist asked, what did you learn from all this? Michael took a deep breath. His eyes softened as he looked straight into the camera. I learned that wealth doesn't define worth. Kindness does. And sometimes, the people who look small today may be the ones holding your destiny tomorrow. The room went silent. Every word carried the weight of truth and humility. He continued, if my story teaches anything, it's this. Don't judge anyone by their appearance. Don't mock the one who seems beneath you. You never know when life will turn the table. The journalists clapped. Some even nodded with emotion. As the conference ended, Michael walked out to the balcony, looking down at the busy Lego streets below. People moved in every direction. Some in fine suits, some pushing carts, all just trying to survive another day. A small smile appeared on his face. He had everything again: wealth, power, peace, but now he also had perspective. Just then his phone buzzed. It was a message from one of the workers in the garage, a simple text that read, "Thank you for teaching us what humility really means, sir." He put his phone away and whispered to himself, that's the real reward. As he turned to head back inside, the narrator's voice could almost be heard echoing softly. In life, never look down on anyone. The hand you mock today may be the hand that lifts you tomorrow. The camera panned up toward the evening sky, the city lights flickering like stars. Michael's voice came one last time, calm, wise, and filled with gratitude. If you enjoyed this story, remember, kindness costs nothing but it changes everything. So always choose it. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring African tales of life, love, and redemption. True power lies not in wealth, but in how you treat those who have none. Sparkles.